Hello and welcome to Cambridge Clinical. Today we're going to be tackling the syllogisms question type. This is quite a dense topic, so I've divided it into sections. This is part 1 and we'll just be dealing with the categorical syllogism question type. So what exactly are syllogisms? Well, simply put, a syllogism is just the inference of a conclusion from some other sources of information. So more specifically then, a categorical syllogism is when a conclusion is inferred from two or more premises. One is the major premise, which relates to the overall theme of the conclusion, and one or more are minor premises, which relate to who the conclusion is actually about, or the subject of the conclusion. I've named them A, B, and C here for simplicity. So here's an example of what I'm talking about, actually one of the earliest known examples of a syllogism. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So you can see here quite clearly how this syllogism fits with our template of premises and conclusions. The major premise, i.e. the one defining the theme, is A, the theme being mortality and men. The minor premise, i.e. the one defining the subject, is B, the subject is Socrates. And finally, we can use A and B to infer the conclusion, which is C. Now that we know what to expect from categorical syllogisms, let's have a look at how you can be tested on them in the UCAT. So looking at this question here, what they've done is to give you the major and minor premises in the question, and then a list of possible conclusions. Your job is to choose which of these conclusions matches the premises to make a functional syllogism. So at this point, I would invite you to pause the video and have a go at this question yourself. Whenever you're ready, click play again and we'll go through it together. Okay, so the first thing I suggest you do when presented with something like this is to simplify what you've been given, be that in your head or on paper. What I tend to do is something like this. So I've inferred from the text that skinks are lizards, iguanas are lizards, Divarsi are skinks, and then we can sub in that first term to say skinks are lizards again, and lizards are reptiles. Now feel free once again to pause the video if you want to check how I inferred that information. Now that last term, lizards are reptiles, can actually be subbed back into all the previous three to give us even more detail. So let's just do that. And so there we go, there's a full simplified list of what we can infer from the text. Now, just before we move on, I want to point out that the reason I use arrows in these examples rather than something like an equal sign is because the direction in which we actually write our terms matters. So if we're going forward, we can say all Divarsi are skinks, all skinks are lizards, all lizards are reptiles. But going backward, it doesn't work quite the same. So only some reptiles are lizards, only some lizards are skinks, and only some skinks are Divarsi. So now that we've fully understood the question, let's keep that working out in mind. I've put it on the right hand of the screen, and review the conclusions that we've been given. So let's have a think about this first one. No lizards are skinks. What do we think about that? So if we look at that first term, it tells us that skinks are lizards. All skinks are lizards, in fact. Remembering the arrows going backward and forward, that implies that some lizards are skinks. So that doesn't agree with this first term, which says that no lizards are skinks. So that's a no. What about this second one? All Divarsi are reptiles. What do we think about that? So if we just look at the Divarsi term in the working out, it does seem to agree with that second conclusion. Remember, when we go forward along the arrows, that means all. So all Divarsi are skinks, all skinks are lizards, all lizards are reptiles. And so indirectly we can say that all Divarsi are reptiles. So that is a yes. Now what about this third term? No Divarsi are iguanas. Have a think about that one. So once again, because the subject of this conclusion are Divarsi, it's worth looking at that Divarsi term in our working out. And lo and behold, there's no mention of iguanas anywhere there. It talks about skinks, lizards, reptiles, but nothing about iguanas. So we can conclude there that number 3 is also true. The fourth conclusion says that some reptiles are skinks. So once again, using that first line of working out, we can see that going forward along the arrow, all skinks are lizards and all lizards are reptiles. And then going back along the arrow, we can say some reptiles are lizards and some lizards are skinks. So indirectly, yes, we can say that some reptiles are skinks as well. So that does follow. Finally then, all skinks are Davarzi. So where are we going to look for that? So even though the subject here are skinks, if we look at that skinks term in the working out, there's no mention of Davarzi anywhere. Now in the Davarzi term, it does relate to skinks, but don't be fooled, because remember that when we go forward along the arrow, we can see that all Davarzi are skinks, but going backward, all skinks are not Davarzi. So there we are, all 5 conclusions with a yes or no after them, as you'll be expected to do in the UCAT. So just remember with these categorical syllogism questions, always to try and simplify your information as much as possible and to be very meticulous about the difference between some and all.